I wanted to do a little video on knee paddling. So knee paddling is one of those things that you kind of start out in the very beginning doing. You get on your knees, you kind of grab the paddle lower, and you get that initial stability where you're not quite comfortable to stand up yet, but laying down isn't going to help you get any closer to standing up. So you get in that knee position, you get your knees nice and wide, and you kind of brace and paddle along. And I think everybody started to learn like that, right? You get on your knees, you get a little speed, you get comfortable, you pop up, you fall off, get back on the board, get to your knees, do it again. So it's a very, beginner stage in paddleboarding. And I think, most people think you're supposed to progress out of that, which to some degree I agree. I mean, it is paddleboarding. You want to stand up. That's the whole goal. And as you progress, especially punching out through the waves and getting outside, I mean, that was a very beginner stage. You'd start on your knees, you'd get comfortable, you'd stand up, then you'd start to get that feel where the wave's coming in to hit you, a breaking wave. You put your foot back, put one foot back on the tail of the board to get that nose to pop up and over, right? And you do like a power stroke as you come up and over and help you over. So you're standing up. And that's kind of how you progress out of knee paddling. You don't need to be on your knees anymore, right? But living on the East Coast, we all know, what about when it gets too big? What about those days where you got 3 or 4 feet of whitewater coming for you? You're not going to pop up and over those, right? And it works okay for the first one. You get up to your feet, you stand, you paddle, you kind of pop your board up and over and jump off the back and let it go over. The wave comes, but what about the next wave? And the wave after that, right? And that's where, knee paddling has always stuck with me. I've never been able to fully get rid of it. The pros would say paddle prone. Well, you lay down on your board and you got your paddle under your chest and it sticks out in front of you and you're paddling. I feel like you've got a few disadvantages right away, where maybe if you're at a point break and you're in the channel, it doesn't matter so much. But when you're going up for the next wave and it's about to crash over you, how do you pop your board up over that? How does the paddle not smack you in the face? What if you get knocked off your board? You're not holding onto your paddle. It's going to fly off and be gone. If you're on your knees, I still have my paddle. I'm paddling along, and the other thing is timing, right? How long does it take you to get to your knees versus laying down? I mean, when I pull myself up on my board, I'm already half kneeling. I could lay flat, or I could just put my knees under me and I'm up, right? You grab your paddle and off you go. Pros say don't do it. Knee paddling's a in-between thing, either prone, standing up. I don't agree with it, and I think our waves are different. We have short period swell, things like that, where you're just getting hammered all the time. You can't always get to your feet. And the other thing I've noticed is when you do get to your feet, there's chop, there's all this other stuff, especially when you're on the inside where the water might be sloshing back and forth and things like that, where you got to do these bracing strokes if you want to stay up. Put your paddle this way to brace, that way. That's all stopping you from paddling ahead, moving forward, getting out, right? Every paddle stroke, every bracing stroke you do is one lost foot or 2 or 3 feet that you would be forward if you were just kneeling and paddling ahead, right? When am I paddling on my knees? I'm not doing this every day. I'm not doing this on ankle high in days. I'm talking when it gets chest, head high, and up. And it's onshore. Sometimes you have a short period swell. You do not have time to get to your feet. And if you do, good luck staying there because the waves are just coming pounding in and hammering you. So on my knees, what I like is you can do something similar to when you're standing up, but you don't have to waste the time of that extra pop-up and then potentially having to brace yourself instability-wise when more waves are coming in because you're on your knees. You've committed less time to getting up. And I think that's part of what it really comes back to is what do you need to do on a bigger day when you're trying to paddle out? And it's you've got all of these disadvantages from being on a SUP when it's bigger. You're on a small shortboard, you can duck dive, there's options. You're on even a longboard, you can turtle, things like that. It just doesn't work with an SUP. You got your paddle, it just doesn't seem to work. So what you want to do is lie, cheat, and steal your way out there, right? You try to find the smoothest line out. Maybe there's just a little channel, coming out. You look for all that stuff. Every time I'm starting out, especially on a bigger day, I'll just stay on my knees because when I get up on my feet, like I said, You got to paddle, you got to brace yourself. You don't want to be wasting time bracing and trying to stay up when another set's coming in. You want to get out as fast as you possibly can. So it's critical is when I'm standing up and I'm kind of trying to brace, I can't really jam on that paddle and give it everything it needs to get me out there as fast as possible. If I push too hard, I get a little tippy, and that's where I got to brace myself again, right? When I'm on my knees, I can crank. I mean, you've got that extra stability. I can put everything I possibly have into every single stroke to help me get out through. And even when a wave's coming in to break over, now you're on your knees, you can shift your weight. This is what you can't do when you're prone. You're laying down prone, you can't really pop the nose up over because you're flat on your board. I mean, you can try to kneel on the tail, but it just doesn't work as well. When you're on your knees, you can lean back and get that nose to come up and still do, just like when you're standing. As the wave comes, you push with your paddle and pop that board up and over. And now if you fail and fall off, you haven't committed all that time to getting to your knees, standing up, paddling out. You've skipped probably, 3 or 4 seconds of getting stood up and stabilized where you were just paddling ahead and getting out and getting past to that. And that's what happens to a lot of my friends when I'm paddling out. I'll leave them in the dust because they're worried about standing up, getting those extra paddles. And while they're doing that and wiggling around, I've already gone, say 10 feet ahead of them and popped up over this next wave that they're not going to break because they weren't as far out as me, right? So kind of recapping, on bigger days, what do you do? I mean, there's obviously some pre-work to do on the bigger days. You kind of go out, you watch it, you see how the sets are rolling in, see if there's some channels, especially working with the tide, right? If the wind's blowing out of a certain direction. So let's just give an example. I come down to the beach, I'm looking out to the east, the wind's coming out of the south, and I see a nice channel cutting out. I'll walk down to the south of where I think that channel is and then kind of let the wind blow me as I paddle out that way, right? So it gives me that kind of forward speed blowing down the beach, to the north as I paddle out and try to stay in that channel. So that's kind of your prep work, is to find the easiest way out. And then, once you get in the water, there's really no second guessing it, right? I think that's another problem that a lot of people have is like, well, I made it a bad moment, I'll hesitate. That's the worst thing you can do. You get in the water, you grab your paddle, and if you're feeling confident, go to your feet. For me, a lot of the times, especially in the East Coast, there'll be like a sandbar out further, say 30 or 40 yards, and then it gets a deep trough right in at the shore. And that'll be where it's the roughest part, because the shore break comes in, it sucks the water out and in. So you stand up there, and you're getting chopped and pulled from all different directions, right? And this is the most critical part. Once you jump in the water, you want to go, go, go. And you don't want to be sitting there floundering, trying to hold on to paddle out to get through those first little wiggly sections. So I'll take the board, walk in about waist deep or whatever, and let one of those waves slide up. And when it starts to pull back out, jump on the board, grab my paddle on my knees, and just start going. And I mean, this is where another point of paddling power, you just give it everything you've got. I think a lot of the days on those bigger waves, just sometimes 5 to 10 feet make the difference between making it out and getting a wave that'll just roll you right back in. So, you get on there, you're on your knees, you can really apply all the power to your paddle. It's the same thing. You're going to fall, you're going to get knocked down. It happens to me all the time. But when you do, you try to get right back on and paddle. And you try to lean for those waves and punch over what you can. But if it looks dangerous, some of the waves coming for me, I'm just like, there's no way I'm going to make this. So I'll paddle as hard as I possibly can up to the wave and then kind of just bail off my board and dive into the wave, pop up over it, grab my leash, pull the board back, hop back on, keep paddling. That's all there is to it. If you don't give it everything you got, you'll lose your line out. So for instance, I'm in a channel I'm trying to get out and I start to get knocked back. The wind's still pushing me down the beach. So before you know it, instead of going out on the channel I was looking for, now I'm directly over a bar and I'm getting crushed even worse because now you're missing that little deep spot. Every wave's going to break on you. So, I think that's really the strategy, is to just get out there any way you can and you try to hold on to every single foot you gain. So if you're paddling out and you've gained 10 feet, and you see that whitewater coming, that's where I'll jump forward off the front of my board. Some people will say take your board and pop it over the wave and kick it ahead of you. I'm not a huge fan of that because I just don't like the fact that the board could swing back and smack you in the head. Anytime your board is ahead of you and there's whitewater rolling over you, there's a possibility of getting hit with your board. So I'll be on my board on my knees or even on my feet, and I'll see this wave, and I'll either jump over the top of it if I'm standing and there's enough room, it's not too high, or, you know, you got to make sure the water's deep enough. You don't want to be doing this in 2-foot water, but generally on bigger days, I'll dive under the wave. Not like a deep, sharp dive. You don't want to do that. You kind of want to, here's the white water coming over, you just kind of want to punch through that white water and get that little extra distance ahead. You know, and sometimes I'll even take my paddle underwater and face it like flat ways to stop me from getting yanked back by my board. Like everything I can gain, anything you can do, lie, cheat, and steal, I'll do to just hold myself in there and try to keep that extra distance I gained outside to me and don't give it back to the wave. Then you'll pop up, you know, I'll grab my board, and depending, you know, sometimes your board flips over, that costs you time. So you pull the board back. If the board's already flipped right, I'll just pivot it around and get on my knees and off I go again. If it's flipped over, you're going to spend that time to flip it. You know, and these are things you can practice. The faster you can flip your board, the faster you can get back on your knees and going, the bigger waves you're going to be able to paddle out into, right? And that's really the end goal, is how big of a day can you get out? I mean, there was a day, I'm going to say 2 weeks ago, where it was, you know, head high. We had storm chop. It wasn't fun. It was awful out there. I mean, it was super choppy, but the waves are huge, right? And I paddle out, and there was a shortboarder just staring at me. He said, "I cannot believe you got a paddleboard out through that today." He was just astonished that, you know, I could even make it. He said, "I couldn't make it if I wasn't duck diving." I mean, yeah, I got beat, but I made it out. You know, a lot of my friends that same day paddled for maybe 15, 20 minutes and never made it out. They just went down the beach and then kind of gave up and walked back. So, you know, it's not really a secret. It's just determination, timing, and holding on to every single foot you get. And I think getting back to that is knee paddling. That's what helps me get out. I would not be able to make it out on the days I make it out if I was not on my knees paddling. I'd be spending too much time bracing, or I wouldn't be able to get enough sight to see the waves coming, or I'd be getting knocked off my board, losing my paddle. You know, every second counts when you're trying to get out in this short period swell. So I hope that helped some people. You know, if you are a knee paddler, don't give it up necessarily, right? I mean, you want to stay on your feet as much as you can, but I think especially if you're an East Coast surfer or you're surfing a lot of chop, you know, whatever struggle, if you just struggle getting out, try staying on your knees. I think it gives you a better shot, you know, and I think that pretty much covers what I do. I hope that helps some people, and let me know what you think. Thanks.